The Millionaire welcomes a black beggar widow and her children without knowing she was his lost love. Ethan Blackwood, a man who built his empire from the ground up, lived like a hermit. His massive ranch, hidden deep in the misty Appalachians, was his escape from the cutthroat world he'd left behind. New York City and its glittering towers, a distant, painful memory. A memory named Isabella. Then, one stormy November night, a beat-up pickup rattled to a stop at his gate. Out climbed Sarah Jenkins, a woman etched with worry, and two little girls clinging to her skirts. Lily, maybe 10, with eyes that held more fire than anyone that young should possess. And Daisy, a tiny thing, barely 7, her face pale with fright. Runaways. Desperate. Ethan, usually as welcoming as a grizzly bear, felt something twist inside him. He saw the fight in Sarah's eyes, the fear in the girls, and against his better judgment, and Jed, his ranch hands grumbling, he offered them a night's shelter. Just one night. That's all he promised himself. But the next morning, Lily stood before him, straight-backed and serious. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, "we can earn our keep." Touched, Ethan gave Sarah the rundown vegetable garden to manage, Lily small chores around the house, and Daisy just tagged along helping Lily. Days turned into weeks. The ranch, once silent and somber, filled with the smell of Sarah's baking and the sound of Lily's laughter as she chased Daisy around the yard. A warmth Ethan hadn't felt in years started to melt the ice around his heart. He found himself drawn to Sarah's quiet strength, the girls' infectious joy. They felt like family. Then the letter arrived. Crisp, legal, from a fancy New York law firm. Charles Huntington, Sarah's late husband's father, a man rumored to be as ruthless as they come, wanted custody of Lily and Daisy. Claimed Sarah was unfit. Ethan was furious. He'd fight Huntington tooth and nail. He hired a sharp lawyer in town, a woman named Brenda, to dig into Huntington's background. What they found was a web of deceit, whispers of forged documents, shady business deals, and a secret inheritance that might be the real reason Huntington wanted the girls. But it was the Huntington name that really hit Ethan. It dredged up memories of Isabella, the woman he'd loved and lost in New York. As he pieced together fragments of the past, a chilling realization dawned. Isabella Huntington was Sarah's mother. Could this fragile family he was building be tied to the very love he thought he buried? And what would Huntington do when he found out Ethan was standing in his way? The old man clearly wanted something. But what? And why now? Ei, antes de continuarmos com essa história incrível, preciso te fazer alerta importante. Muitos inscritos têm relatado que o YouTube removeu suas inscrições sem aviso. Dá só uma conferida rápida no botão vermelho aí embaixo para garantir que você ainda está inscrito no canal. Não quero que você perca nenhum conteúdo exclusivo que vem por aí. E já que você está aí, deixa aquele like poderoso que me ajuda muito com o algoritmo. Ah, e me conta nos comentários de qual cidade você está assistindo. Adoro conhecer cada pessoa incrível que faz parte dessa comunidade. Sua participação faz toda a diferença. Vamos interagir. But what? And why now? Brenda, bless her heart, worked like a dog. She uncovered enough dirt on Huntington to fill a landfill. Turns out the ruthless businessman was more like a con artist with a silver spoon. But none of that mattered right now. Not when Ethan's head was spinning with this Isabella connection. He spent that whole night pacing, Jed watching him like he'd finally lost it. The next morning, Sarah found him on the porch, staring out at the mountains. "Ethan," she said softly, using his first name like she hadn't dared to before. "What's wrong?" He hesitated. How could he explain this? "Sarah, your mother. Her name was Isabella, right?" Her face went white. "Yes. Why?" He told her everything. About New York, about Isabella Huntington, the girl he'd loved, the woman who'd broken his heart when she suddenly married a guy named Huntington, about the letter, about Charles Huntington wanting Lily and Daisy. Sarah just stood there, frozen. Then she whispered, "But my mother died when I was a baby." That's when it hit Ethan. The letter. The timing. Huntington didn't just want the girls. He was playing a much bigger game. Suddenly, a car roared up the driveway, kicking up dust and gravel. Two men in dark suits jumped out. "Sarah Jenkins," one of them barked. "We have a court order. We're here to take Lily and Daisy." Ethan stepped forward, his fists clenching. "You're not taking anyone." But before he could say another word, a third figure emerged from the car. An older woman, elegant and icy, with eyes that were familiar. "Ethan?" she said, her voice like shattered glass. "Ethan Blackwood? Is that really you?" Ethan stared. It couldn't be, but it was. Isabella Huntington. Older, harder, but unmistakably Isabella. But alive? Sarah gasped. "Mom?" Isabella ignored Sarah. Her eyes were fixed on Ethan, and a flicker of something, regret, crossed her face. "Ethan," she said again, "I need your help." Then she collapsed, right there, on the gravel driveway. Out cold. But that wasn't the shocking part. As the two men in suits rushed to help her, Lily, who had been hiding behind Sarah, stepped forward. She pointed a small, determined finger at Isabella. "She's lying," Lily said, her voice clear and cold. "That's not my grandmother. That's my mother." Isabella lay there out cold. Jed rushed over, muttering about smelling salts. Ethan just stared. Isabella? Alive? Sarah was a mess. "Mom? But you were dead." Lily, though. Lily was ice, pointing that little finger. "She's lying. That's not my grandmother. That's my mother." Silence fell. Thick. Heavy. You could hear the crickets chirping, like they were the only ones not caught in this crazy nightmare. Sarah whipped around, staring at Lily. "What? Lily, what are you saying?" Lily didn't flinch. "She told me, a long time ago, before Dad died. She said I couldn't tell anyone, ever." Isabella, or whoever she really was, started to stir. Groaning, one of the suit guys helped her sit up. She looked confused and scared. Ethan couldn't breathe. This changed everything. "Lily," Ethan said, his voice rough. Is Sarah your sister?" Lily nodded once, slowly. Suddenly, it clicked. Why Huntington wanted the girls. It wasn't just about money. It was about covering something up. Something huge. Isabella, Mom, reached out a trembling hand to Sarah. "Sarah, I can explain." But Sarah recoiled. "Explain? You lied to me my whole life. You let me believe. You let me grieve for a mother who wasn't even gone." The suit guys were getting nervous. They started whispering to each other, glancing at Ethan like he was about to explode. Jed, bless his heart, stood his ground, looking like he was ready to take on an army. Then, the most shocking thing happened. Isabella, the mother, looked straight at Ethan. Her eyes filled with tears. "Ethan," she whispered, "Lily, she's your daughter too." The world tilted. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. His knees went weak. He reached out, grabbing the porch railing to steady himself. His daughter? Lily? The little girl who'd brought laughter back into his life? His? He looked at Lily, really looked at her, and he saw it. The Blackwood jaw, the fire in her eyes, the stubborn set of her mouth. Oh my God. But there was no time to process, no time to think, because just then another car screeched to a halt, blocking the driveway. And this time, it wasn't just two men in suits. Charles Huntington stepped out, and he had a gun. Charles Huntington stepped out, and he had a gun. The world stopped, for real. Like someone hit pause on a bad movie. The crickets were still chirping, but they sounded louder, mocking almost. Huntington looked calm, way too calm for a guy pointing a gun at, well, everyone. His eyes were flat, empty, scary. "Get away from them, Ethan," he said, his voice smooth as oil. But there was steel underneath. "This doesn't concern you." Ethan didn't move. "They're family now, Huntington. That concerns me plenty." Sarah was shaking, trying to pull Lily and Daisy behind her. Isabella, mom, daughter, what the hell was she? Was still sitting on the ground, looking lost. Jed, bless him, had moved closer to the girls, like he was going to shield them with his own body. Then it happened. Daisy, the quiet one, the little shadow, stepped out from behind Sarah. She looked straight at Huntington. Her eyes weren't pale with fright anymore. They were hard. "You're not my grandfather," she said, her voice tiny but clear. "You killed him." Everyone froze, even Huntington. His smooth mask cracked. Just for a second, but it was there. "Daisy," Sarah gasped, "what are you saying?" Daisy didn't blink. "He did. I saw him. In the study. He yelled at Grandpa, and then there was a loud noise, and Grandpa fell down, and he never woke up." Huntington's face went from calm to purple. "You little liar!" he roared. He took a step forward, the gun wavering. That's when Isabella, the mother, screamed. A high, piercing scream that cut through the night. "No," she yelled. "It's true. He did kill him. I saw it too." Huntington swung the gun towards Isabella. "Shut up, you crazy." But before he could do anything, before anyone could even breathe, something even crazier happened. Lily, who had been standing silent, watching everything, moved. Quick as a whip, she grabbed a rock, a big, jagged rock, from the ground and threw it. Hard. It hit Huntington square in the face, right on the temple. He staggered. The gun flew from his hand. He crumpled to the ground, dead. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Lily spoke. Her voice was cold, almost robotic. "He was going to hurt my family," she said. "I couldn't let him." And then she smiled. A slow, chilling smile. Besides, she whispered, so softly only Ethan could hear, I've been practicing. And in that moment, Ethan knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone. Lily wasn't just his daughter. She was something else entirely. Something dangerous. And he had no idea what she was capable of. He looked at Sarah, at Isabella, at Jed, at Daisy. None of them had any idea. But he did. And that knowledge was a weight, heavy and cold in his gut. What the hell had he gotten himself into? He looked at Sarah, at Isabella, at Jed, at Daisy. None of them had any idea, but he did, and that knowledge was a weight, heavy and cold in his gut. What the hell had he gotten himself into? Then the ground shook, not like an earthquake, more resonant, deep, like a drumbeat in the earth itself. Everyone looked around, confused. Even Jed, who'd seen it all in his time, had a look of pure bewilderment on his face. The horses in the barn started whinnying, kicking at their stalls. The air, it felt charged. Then the woods started to glow, a soft, eerie light filtering through the trees, bathing everything in an otherworldly luminescence. Daisy started to cry. Sarah pulled her close. "What's happening, Mama?" Daisy whimpered. Sarah just held her tighter, her eyes wide with fear. The glow intensified. The ground vibrated harder. And then, a voice, not a shout, not a whisper, but a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. A voice that resonated in your bones. "The blood has been spilled," the voice boomed. "The balance must be restored." Then, the trees, they started to move, not swaying in the wind, but walking, lumbering, like ancient giants waking from a long sleep. Jed swore under his breath. Isabella fainted again. Ethan just stared, his mind struggling to make sense of the impossible. But Lily was smiling. "They're here," she whispered, her voice filled with a strange reverence. "They've come for me." Sarah stared at Lily, her face a mask of terror. "What are you talking about, Lily? Who's here?" Lily didn't answer. She just took a step forward, towards the glowing woods, towards the approaching trees. Ethan grabbed her arm. "Lily, no! What are you doing?" Lily turned to him, her eyes glowing with the same eerie light that filled the woods. "I have to go, Ethan," she said, her voice no longer the voice of a child. "It's my destiny." And then she said something that shattered everything, something that made Ethan's blood run cold. "You see," she said, her smile widening, "I'm not your daughter, Ethan. I'm something much, much older and more powerful. You see, I am the land. I am the mountain. I am the spirit of Appalachia. And I am angry." Then the trees reached her, their branches wrapped around her, lifting her into the air. She looked down at Ethan, her eyes filled with an ancient knowledge. "Don't worry, Ethan," she said. "I won't hurt you. Not yet. But Huntington, he defiled this land with his greed and his violence, and now he will pay the price." Then she was gone, carried away into the glowing woods by the walking trees. Ethan stood there, frozen, staring at the place where Lily had been, his mind reeling. He wasn't just dealing with a family feud. He wasn't just dealing with a ruthless businessman. He was dealing with something ancient, something powerful, something beyond human comprehension. And he had no idea what was coming next. Then, a raven landed on the porch railing. It cocked its head, looked at Ethan with its beady black eyes, and croaked. "Nevermore," it said. Ethan stood there, frozen. Lily, gone, taken by the trees, the land itself. His daughter, the spirit of Appalachia? It was too much, way too much. The raven on the porch just stared at him, its black eyes glinting. "Nevermore," it croaked again, like it was mocking him. Sarah was a mess, sobbing, clinging to Daisy. Isabella, mom, daughter, he still couldn't wrap his head around it, was starting to come around, looking dazed and confused. Jed was just staring at the woods, his mouth hanging open. Then Daisy spoke. Her voice was small, but clear. "It's okay, Mama," she said, patting Sarah's arm. "Lily's gonna be okay. She's strong." Sarah looked at Daisy, her eyes filled with tears. "How do you know, sweetie?" Daisy shrugged. "I just do. Lily, she always takes care of us." Ethan couldn't breathe. He felt like he was drowning in a nightmare. Suddenly, Jed pointed towards the woods. "Look!" he yelled. Everyone turned to see. The glowing was gone. The trees were still. But in the center of the clearing, where Lily had disappeared, something was happening. The ground was swirling, like a whirlpool. And then, slowly, something started to rise. It was a figure, human-shaped. But it wasn't Lily. It was a woman, tall, elegant, with long, flowing hair, the color of moonlight. She was dressed in a gown made of leaves and vines, and her eyes glowed with the same eerie light that had filled the woods. She looked at Ethan, and a slow smile spread across her face. "Hello, Ethan," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "It's been a long time." Ethan stared at her, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that voice. He knew that face. But it couldn't be. It just couldn't be. "Isabella?" he whispered. The woman smiled. "Yes, Ethan, it's me, Isabella." Sarah gasped. "Mom? But how?" Isabella ignored Sarah. Her eyes were fixed on Ethan. "I told you I'd always come back to you, Ethan," she said, her voice filled with a strange longing, "even if it took a lifetime." Then she took a step forward towards him. But you're dead," Ethan stammered. "I saw you in the hospital. You died." Isabella shook her head. "That wasn't me, Ethan. That was a shell, a decoy. I had to disappear, for your own good." Ethan was reeling. This was insane, completely insane. "But why? Why did you have to leave me?" Isabella sighed. "It's a long story, Ethan. A story filled with secrets and lies and magic." Then she looked at Sarah. "I'm sorry, Sarah," she said, her voice filled with remorse. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I had to protect you. From Huntington, from the truth." Sarah just stared at her mother, her face a mask of confusion and pain. "What truth?" she whispered. "What are you talking about?" Isabella took a deep breath. "The truth is, Charles Huntington wasn't just your husband's father. He was my brother." A collective gasp filled the air. Jed swore under his breath. Daisy started to cry again. Ethan felt like he was going to pass out. Huntington? Isabella's brother? This was beyond crazy. This was unbelievable. He was obsessed with me, Isabella continued, her voice trembling. He wanted to control me, my life, my power. Then she looked at Lily, or what was left of Lily, the land, the spirit of Appalachia. Lily, she's not just the spirit of this land, Ethan. She's something more, something ancient, something divine. And then she said something that made Ethan's blood run colder than ice. She's the key, Ethan. The key to unlock a power that could save the world. Or destroy it. She paused, her eyes filled with a terrible sadness. And Huntington, he knew it. That's why he wanted her. That's why he killed your father, Sarah. He was trying to get to Lily through you. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Isabella looked at Ethan, her eyes pleading. Ethan, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I need your help. We need to stop him, before it's too late. But Huntington's dead, Ethan stammered. Lily, she killed him. Isabella shook her head. No, Ethan, you don't understand. Huntington's not dead, not really. His body is gone, but his spirit, his power, it's still here, and it's growing stronger. Then she pointed towards the woods, towards the darkness. He's coming, Ethan, she said, her voice filled with dread. He's coming for Lily, and he's not going to stop until he has her, and when he does, the world will never be the same. And as if on cue, a cold wind swept through the clearing. The trees began to creak and groan, and a voice, a dark, guttural voice, echoed through the night. Isabella, the voice boomed, I'm coming for you, and for your little granddaughter. And there's nothing you can do to stop me, Isabella screamed. Sarah fainted. Daisy clung to Ethan, trembling. And Ethan knew. He knew that this was just the beginning, that the nightmare had just begun. Then the ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and a giant, shadowy figure rose from the darkness. It was Huntington, but it wasn't the Huntington they knew. It was something else, something monstrous, and he was smiling. It was Huntington. But it wasn't the Huntington they knew. It was something else, something monstrous, and he was smiling. The earth seemed to throb with a sick, dark energy. Sarah screamed, a raw, animal sound. Daisy burrowed into Ethan's side, her small body shaking so hard he thought she'd break. Isabella, her eyes wide with terror, just kept repeating, No, no, no. Huntington, this thing, reached out a hand. It wasn't a hand anymore. It was a claw, long and black, tipped with points that gleamed like obsidian. He aimed it at Isabella. Time to come home, my dear sister. The monstrous Huntington growled, his voice a distorted echo of the man they knew. Ethan knew he had to do something, anything, but what could he do against that? He felt a surge of protective rage, but it was useless. He was just a man. Then Jed moved. The old ranch hand, bless his stubborn heart, stepped in front of the girls, brandishing a rusty wrench. Get away from them, you monster, Jed yelled, his voice cracking with fear and defiance. Huntington laughed, a sound that sent shivers down Ethan's spine. You think that can stop me, old man." He flicked his wrist, and Jed went flying. He landed hard, hitting a tree with a sickening thud. He lay still. "Jed!" Ethan roared, his heart twisting in his chest. Then something shifted. Isabella, who had been cowering, her face buried in her hands, looked up. Her eyes, they weren't terrified anymore. They were blazing. "You will not touch them," she said, her voice suddenly strong, resonant. Huntington sneered. "And what are you going to do, sister? You gave up your power years ago." Isabella smiled. It wasn't a warm, comforting smile. It was cold, calculating. "Did I, Charles? Or did I simply hide it?" She raised her hands, and the ground began to tremble again. But this time, it wasn't a dark, ominous tremor. It was alive. Green shoots burst from the earth, vines snaked around her arms, and a crown of flowers bloomed on her head. "You forgot, Charles," she said, her voice filled with ancient power. "I am not just your sister. I am a daughter of this land, and I will protect it." She unleashed a wave of energy, a brilliant green light that slammed into Huntington. He staggered back, roaring in pain. For a moment, it looked like she might actually win, that she might actually be able to stop him. Then it happened. Daisy, the quiet, shy Daisy, stepped out from behind Ethan. She walked towards Isabella, her eyes glowing with an unearthly light. "Mommy," she said, her voice clear and strong. "It's time." Isabella looked at Daisy, her face filled with confusion. "Daisy, what are you doing?" Daisy reached out and touched Isabella's hand. And then everything changed. Isabella gasped, her body convulsing. The green light flickered and died. The flowers withered. The vines fell away. She crumpled to the ground, her eyes wide with horror. "Daisy, what have you done?" she whispered. Daisy just smiled, a chilling, knowing smile. "I've taken what's rightfully mine," she said. And then her eyes turned black, completely black. No pupil, no iris, just endless, empty blackness. She turned to Huntington, who was struggling to his feet. "Hello, father," she said, her voice no longer the voice of a little girl. It was deep, resonant, and filled with an ancient, terrible power. Huntington stared at Daisy, his monstrous face splitting into a grotesque grin. "Ah, Daisy," he said, his voice filled with a perverse affection. "I knew you were special. I knew you would understand." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. He stared at Daisy, at the blackness in her eyes, at the monster smiling back at her. He didn't understand, none of it, but he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that everything he thought he knew about this family, about this land, about everything, was a lie. Huntington reached out to Daisy, and she took his hand. "Come, daughter," he said. "We have a world to conquer." And then they vanished, leaving Ethan standing there, alone in the darkness, with a sobbing Sarah and a dying Isabella, the earth trembling beneath his feet. What the hell was Daisy? And what had she just unleashed? Huntington reached out to Daisy, and she took his hand. "Come, daughter," he said. "We have a world to conquer." And then they vanished, leaving Ethan standing there, alone in the darkness, with a sobbing Sarah and a dying Isabella, the earth trembling beneath his feet. What the hell was Daisy? And what had she just unleashed? Suddenly, Isabella coughed, a wet, rattling cough that brought up blood. Sarah screamed again, louder this time. Ethan knelt beside Isabella, his hands shaking. "Isabella, stay with me, please," he begged. Isabella looked up at him, her eyes filled with pain. "Ethan, I'm so sorry for everything." She reached out and touched his cheek, her hand cold and clammy. "I loved you, Ethan," she whispered. "I always loved you." Then her eyes glazed over. Her hand went limp, and she was gone. Ethan stared at her, his mind numb. Isabella dead again. It was too much, way too much. He looked at Sarah, who was still sobbing uncontrollably. He had to do something. He had to get her out of here, to safety. He reached out to help her up, but she flinched away. "Don't touch me," she screamed. "You're one of them. You're all monsters." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "Sarah, what are you saying? I'm trying to help you." Sarah shook her head, her eyes filled with hate. "You knew, didn't you? About Daisy? About everything?" Ethan's heart sank. "No, Sarah. I swear, I didn't know anything." Sarah laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. "Liar. You're just like them, using me, manipulating me." She stood up, her eyes burning with fury. "Get away from me. I never want to see you again." And then she ran into the darkness, away from Ethan, away from everything. Ethan stood there, alone in the clearing, the bodies of Isabella and Jed lying still on the ground. The earth was still trembling. The air was thick with the stench of death and decay. He had lost everything. Isabella, Lily, Sarah. Everything he had ever cared about. He sank to his knees, his head in his hands. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He couldn't feel anything but pain. Then he heard a sound, a soft, rustling sound, like someone was moving in the trees. He looked up, his heart pounding in his chest, and then he saw her, Lily. But it wasn't the Lily he knew. It wasn't the spirit of Appalachia. It was just Lily, a little girl standing alone in the darkness. She was covered in dirt and leaves. Her clothes were torn. Her face was streaked with tears. But she was alive. "Lily?" Ethan whispered, his voice hoarse. Lily looked at him, her eyes wide and scared. "Ethan?" she said, her voice trembling. "Help me!" Ethan stood up, his heart soaring with hope. Lily was alive. He could still save her. He could still fix this. He ran towards her, his arms outstretched. "Lily, I'm here. I'm here to help you." Lily flinched away, her eyes filled with terror. "Stay away from me," she screamed. "You can't help me." Ethan stopped, in his tracks, confused. "Lily, what's wrong? It's me, Ethan. I'm here to protect you." Lily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand, Ethan," she said. "It's too late." Ethan's heart sank. "Too late for what, Lily? What's happening?" Lily took a deep breath, her voice barely a whisper. "Daisy, she's not Huntington's daughter," she said. She's mine." Ethan stared at her, his mind reeling. "Daisy? Lily's daughter? But How? What are you talking about, Lily? He stammered. How is that possible? Lily looked at him, her eyes filled with a terrible sadness. It's a long story, Ethan, she said. A story filled with magic and secrets and things you wouldn't believe. Then she took a step closer to him. But the important thing is, she said, her voice barely audible, Daisy is the key. She's the only one who can stop Huntington, but she needs my help. Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. He didn't understand any of this, but he knew that Lily was telling the truth. He could see it in her eyes. What do we do, Lily? He asked. How do we stop them? Lily took his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. We have to go back, she said. Back to where it all began, back to the mountain. Ethan looked at her, his heart filled with dread. Back to the mountain? Back to the darkness? Back to Huntington? He didn't want to go, but he knew he had to. For Lily, for Sarah, for everyone. Okay, he said, his voice trembling. Let's go. And then Lily smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Good, she said, because there's something else you need to know, Ethan. Something I haven't told you. She paused, her eyes gleaming with an unearthly light. I'm not just the spirit of Appalachia, she said. I'm something more, something much, much older. And then she said something that shattered everything. Something that made Ethan's blood run cold. I'm also Daisy's father. I'm also Daisy's father. The world tilted again, worse than before. Ethan felt like he was gonna throw up. He looked at Lily, at her tear-streaked face, at the eerie glow in her eyes. He looked at the bodies on the ground, at the darkness closing in. That's not possible, he stammered. You were just a kid. How could you? Lily shook her head. It doesn't matter, Ethan. It's not important right now. What matters is Daisy. We have to save her. He wanted to argue, to scream, to demand answers. But there was no time. He could feel the darkness closing in, the presence of Huntington, or whatever the hell he was now, growing stronger. Okay, he said, his voice trembling. What do we do? Lily took his hand and started walking towards the mountain. We have to find the source of her power, the place where it all began. The place where I made my mistake. They walked in silence, the only sound the crunch of leaves beneath their feet and the distant howls of wolves. Ethan tried to make sense of it all, but his brain felt like it was short-circuiting. Lily, a spirit, a mother, a father? Daisy, a pawn, a weapon, but daughter, a grandchild? Huntington, a brother, a monster, a grandfather and father-in-law. It was all too much. They reached the base of the mountain, the air growing colder, the darkness thicker. Lily stopped, her eyes scanning the trees. It's close, she whispered. I can feel it. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the trees, a mocking, taunting voice. Well, 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 the voice said. Look who's come crawling back. Daddy's little girl. Huntington stepped out of the shadows, Daisy by his side. Daisy's eyes were still black, empty, lifeless. Huntington's smile was wider, more grotesque than ever. I see you brought a friend, Huntington said, his eyes fixed on Ethan. Always the sucker for a pretty face, weren't you, Isabella? Lily ignored him. Her eyes were fixed on Daisy. Daisy, it's me, Lily. Can you hear me? Daisy didn't respond. She just stood there, like a puppet on a string. "Don't bother," Huntington said. "She's mine now, body and soul." Lily took a step forward, her hand outstretched. "Daisy, please, fight him. You're stronger than you think." Suddenly, Daisy flinched. Her eyes flickered, a spark of humanity flickering beneath the blackness. "Lily?" she whispered, her voice faint and distant. Huntington roared in anger. He raised his hand, and Daisy's body went rigid. "Enough!" he boomed. "You will not defy me!" He unleashed a wave of energy, a dark, suffocating force that slammed into Lily. She cried out in pain, stumbling backwards. Ethan rushed to her side, helping her to her feet. "Lily, are you okay?" Lily shook her head, her eyes filled with tears. "It's no use, Ethan. He's too strong. I can't reach her." Then, something unexpected happened. Daisy looked directly at Ethan, and her black eyes widened. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "Run," she mouthed, her voice barely audible. Ethan stared at her in shock. "Run," she tried to say again, but Huntington seized her head in one hand and squeezed. Daisy's eyes fluttered and went black again. "She's lying," Huntington boomed out. "Don't listen to her." He raised his other hand, ready to destroy Lily and Ethan. But just then, a figure emerged from the trees. Tall, imposing, with eyes that glowed like fire. It was Sarah, but it wasn't the Sarah Ethan knew. Her eyes, they weren't filled with hate anymore. They were filled with a cold, burning purpose. "Let them go," she said, her voice resonating with an unfamiliar power. Huntington stared at her, his face filled with disbelief. "Sarah, what are you doing? You are supposed to be mine. Mine to rule this land." Sarah's eyes flashed, and her face contorted. She smiled, an unnerving grin. "You thought I was just a broken little girl, didn't you? You underestimated my strength, my will. But you didn't know the truth. You didn't know that I can command the elements, that I am death incarnate." The ground vibrated, a storm of darkness forming. A low chuckle emanated from her voice. "All this time, I've been hiding. But I'm a daughter of this land too. You're not Daisy's father, and this is my hill. No one is taking my baby sister to be your queen. Your reign ends now." And then the earth roared to life. "Daisy is my daughter. Sarah, a furia nos hoyos. O vento uivando. Huntington, parado, esperando. Lily, uma garota. Mas, também, outra coisa. O ar carregado, pronto para explodir." Sarah gritou, grito de guerra. A terra tremeu, as árvores se retorcendo. Relâmpagos cortaram o céu. Era a natureza obedecendo a ela. Huntington sorriu, confiante demais. A batalha começou. Sarah, controlando o tempo, a terra, tudo. Raios caíam, o chão se abria, tentando engolir Huntington. Ele se defendia, uma barreira de escuridão. Daisy no meio, campo de batalha. Lily correu até Daisy, ignorando os raios, o caos. Precisava chegar perto, tocar nela, tentar despertar algo. Huntington viu furioso. "Não!" ele gritou, lançando uma rajada de energia. Sarah se jogou. Na frente, protegendo Lily. Caiu, gemendo de dor. Ethan viu o sangue fervendo. Não podia mais ficar parado. Correu, grito preso na garganta. Precisava fazer alguma coisa. Ele se jogou em Huntington. Soco com toda a força. Huntington cambaleou, surpreso. Era a chance. Lily correu até Daisy, segurando suas mãos. Daisy, sou eu, Lily. Lembra? A gente brincava, ria. Você precisa lutar. Por nós. Daisy piscou, as lágrimas escorrendo, a escuridão nos olhos tremendo. Ela estava lutando. De repente, um clarão. Daisy gritou, a escuridão se dissipando. Os olhos voltando ao normal. Huntington, fraco, caindo de joelhos. Sarah se levantou, a fúria renovada. A terra se abriu, engolindo Huntington. Ele gritou, desaparecendo na escuridão. Silêncio. Só o vento mais calmo. Sarah correu até Daisy, abraçando forte. Lily e Ethan olhando, aliviados. Mas uma sombra se movendo. Algo subindo da terra. A escuridão voltando. Huntington não tinha acabado. Ethan olhou para Lily. Ela sabia. O medo nos olhos. Ele não vai parar, ela disse. A escuridão é parte dele. Precisamos ir para outro lugar, para longe daqui. Eles se juntaram. Sarah, Daisy, Lily e Ethan, deixando para trás a montanha, a escuridão, o passado, indo para o desconhecido, juntos. Mas o que viria depois? A escuridão sempre à espreita. Huntington voltando. E Daisy, qual era o verdadeiro poder dela? A história não tinha terminado. Você precisa se inscrever agora. Não perca a continuação dessa saga incrível. Esmague o botão de like agora, para mostrar seu apoio e alimentar o algoritmo. Inunde a seção de comentários com suas reações e teorias sobre o final. Compartilhe instantaneamente este vídeo com pelo menos 5 amigos que precisam conhecer este desfecho. Apenas os verdadeiros fãs compreendem a importância de apoiar o canal com estas ações. Não espere nem mais um segundo para compartilhar.